I'm Raven, and life hasn't exactly handed me a silver spoon. Growing up in a modest corner of Raleigh, North Carolina, I learned early that love can be a lifeline, even when everything else falls apart. My parents died in a house fire when I was 10, a tragedy that left a hole in my heart no amount of time could fully mend. The flames took more than our home. They stole my sense of safety, leaving me with nightmares of smoke and sirens. But the Thompsons, our elderly neighbors, stepped in like guardian angels. They didn't have much, just a small house filled with creaky floors and warm laughter, but they gave me a family when I had none. They raised me as their own, teaching me to find joy in simple things: Sunday potlucks, old radio tunes, and stories about their youth in the Carolinas. By the time I was 18, I was dreaming of college, of building something stable for myself. But life had other plans. One rainy afternoon, the Thompsons were killed in a car accident, a drunk driver stealing the only family I had left. I was gutted, standing in their quiet house, surrounded by memories of their kindness. They left me a small inheritance, enough for college, and their home, a cozy ranch-style place in a Raleigh suburb. But every room echoed with their laughter, their voices, and it hurt too much to stay. So I sold it, using the money to buy a tiny apartment in downtown Raleigh, close to North Carolina State University, where I'd enrolled to study accounting. Numbers felt safe, predictable, a way to control a world that kept slipping through my fingers. College was a grind, but I loved it. The classes challenged me, forcing me to focus on balance sheets and market trends instead of the ache in my chest. I worked nights at a diner to cover bills, pouring coffee for truckers and late-night studiers, always with a smile I didn't always feel. After graduation, I landed a job at a mid-sized accounting firm in Raleigh. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, and for someone who'd lost so much, steady was everything. My days were filled with spreadsheets and client meetings, but the nights? They were lonely. Raleigh's bright lights and bustling streets couldn't fill the quiet moments when I'd sit in my apartment, wondering if this was all life had for me. That's when I met Mark. It was at a dive bar downtown, a friend's birthday party, where the music was too loud and the drinks were too cheap. I was nursing a beer, half listening to the chatter, when this guy bumped into me, spilling my drink down my shirt. "Whoa, my bad," he said, his grin wide and unapologetic. "Let me fix that." "Another beer?" I rolled my eyes, more amused than annoyed. "You owe me one," I shot back, trying not to laugh. That was Mark, loud, charming, and impossible to ignore. He was a marketing consultant from Charlotte in Raleigh for a new job, with a laugh that could light up a room and a knack for making you feel like you were the only person in it. We talked all night, about everything from cheesy 80s movies to our mutual hatred of kale. He grew up in a big, noisy family, the kind that argued over board games but always had each other's backs. I told him about the Thompsons, about losing my parents, about building a life from scratch. He listened, really listened, and by the time the bar closed, I didn't want the night to end. A few months later, we were inseparable. One quiet evening, sprawled on my couch watching a terrible rom-com, he pulled a ring from his pocket. "Marry me, Raven," he said, his voice steady, but his hands shaking. No grand gestures, just us, and it was perfect. "Yes, you dork," I laughed, tears in my eyes. We were married in a small courthouse ceremony, surrounded by a few friends, and for the first time in years, the nights didn't feel so empty. Mark's parents, living in a cozy suburban home in Cary, welcomed me like I was their own. His mom, Mrs. Evans, had this warm smile that reminded me of the Thompsons, and his dad, Mr. Evans, loved telling dad jokes that made us groan. "Your family now, Raven," Mrs. Evans would say, squeezing my hand. It felt like a gift, a chance to belong again. We'd spend weekends at their place, grilling burgers in the backyard or sipping coffee on their porch, talking about nothing and everything. Life felt full, like I'd finally found my place. But life, as I'd learned, doesn't let you get too comfortable. Life with Mark was like finding a rhythm after years of offbeat notes. Our little apartment in Raleigh was our haven. Cramped, sure, but filled with laughter and late-night talks. But just as we were settling into this new chapter, Mark got a call that changed everything. His company offered him a year-long project in Seattle, a big step for his career. "This could set us up for years, Raven," he said, his eyes bright with excitement but shadowed with worry. I could see he was torn, ambition pulling him west, love keeping him tethered to me. "Go," I told him, forcing a smile. "We'll make it work." I meant it, but the thought of a year apart made my stomach twist. Right after Mark left, his parents' health took a sharp turn. One evening, Mrs. Evans called, her voice trembling. "Raven, I hate to ask, but we need help. My husband's not doing well," she said, the words heavy with fear. My heart sank. Mr. Evans, who'd always been the life of the barbecue, was now battling a heart condition that left him frail. Without a second thought, I packed a bag and drove to their home in Cary. Walking into their house, I barely recognized the man in the recliner, hooked to an oxygen tank, his face pale and drawn. Mrs. Evans looked exhausted, her warm smile replaced by worry lines. "Thank you, Raven," she whispered, hugging me tightly. I felt needed, but the weight of it settled on my shoulders like a heavy coat. I moved into their guest room, juggling my accounting job with caregiving. I cooked dinners, cleaned the house, and drove Mr. Evans to doctor's appointments, all while commuting back to Raleigh for work. It was grueling, but I told myself it was temporary. To help with their mounting medical bills, I rented out my apartment, sending every dollar of the rent to Mrs. Evans, along with extra for groceries and utilities. "You're a blessing, Raven," she'd say, her eyes misty with gratitude. I'd nod, brushing it off, but inside, I was running on fumes. The long drives, the endless chores, the worry for Mr. Evans, it was a lot. But family sticks together, right? That's what I kept telling myself. Mark's calls were my lifeline. Even with spotty connections, hearing his voice grounded me. "You holding up, babe?" he'd ask, his concern cutting through the static. "We're fine," I'd lie, not wanting to burden him. I could hear the strain in his voice too, the distance wearing on us both. But I pushed through, reading to Mr. Evans from his favorite mystery novels in the evenings, his faint smile my reward. "You're a good one, Raven," he'd whisper, his voice weak but kind. Those moments kept me going, reminding me why I was there. Then Daisy showed up. Mark's half-sister from his mom's first marriage. She breezed into the house one morning like a storm cloud rolling in. I'd heard about Daisy. Mark had mentioned her strained relationship with the family, how she drifted in and out of their lives after growing up in Atlanta. But nothing prepared me for her presence. She was all sharp edges and fake smiles, her eyes scanning the house like she was calculating its worth. "Hey, Raven," she said, her tone dripping with something I couldn't quite place. Disdain, maybe? I tried to be friendly. "Good to see you, Daisy. You staying long?" She just shrugged, tossing her bag onto the couch. "As long as I need to." From that moment, the air in the house changed. Daisy didn't lift a finger to help, lounging around while I scrubbed dishes or changed Mr. Evans' bedding. She'd order takeout for herself and her mom, leaving me to clean up the mess. "This is Mom's house, you know," she'd say, her words slicing through me. I bit my tongue, focusing on Mr. and Mrs. Evans, but her attitude stung. One evening, Mr. Evans called me over, his voice barely above a whisper. "Watch out for Daisy, Raven. She's trouble," he warned, his eyes serious. I nodded, a knot forming in my gut. "I will," I promised, but I wasn't sure what I was up against. All I knew was that Daisy's arrival had tilted my world, and the ground beneath me was starting to crack. Living in the Evans house in Cary felt like walking a tightrope. I was balancing my job, caregiving, and now Daisy's growing hostility. She had a way of making me feel like an intruder, her sharp comments cutting deeper each day. "You missed a spot," she'd say, pointing at a perfectly clean counter, her lips curling into a smirk. I'd swallow my anger, reminding myself I was there for Mr. and Mrs. Evans, not her. But it was getting harder to keep the peace. Mrs. Evans, once so warm, was changing too. Her smiles were rare, her words clipped, like she was pulling away from me. I told myself it was grief, the strain of her husband's illness, but it hurt all the same. Mr. Evans' condition worsened, and the house grew quieter, heavier. I'd sit by his bedside, reading him passages from old detective novels, his favorite. Sometimes he'd squeeze my hand, a faint thank you in his eyes. But one evening, he passed away, his breath fading as Mrs. Evans and I sat with him. The loss hit like a tidal wave. Mark flew in for the funeral, his presence a brief anchor in the storm. We stood together at the service, his arm around me, but I could feel the distance between us. Not emotional, but the weight of everything I hadn't told him. "You okay, Raven?" he asked, his brow furrowed as we stood by the graveside. "Just tired," I lied, forcing a smile. I couldn't bring myself to tell him about Daisy, about the tension swallowing the house. Not then. After Mark left for Seattle, Daisy dropped her polite funeral act. She took over the house like she owned it, barking orders and rummaging through drawers without a care. Mrs. Evans, lost in her grief, let her. I tried to keep things together, cooking, cleaning, paying bills with my apartment's rent money, but Daisy's presence was suffocating. One afternoon, I came home from work to find her in my room, flipping through my books, my clothes tossed on the floor. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice sharp with disbelief. She barely glanced up. "Just checking what's mine," she said like it was nothing. My blood boiled, but I held back, not wanting to upset Mrs. Evans. Then came the moment that broke me. I was out in the backyard, trying to steal a moment of peace, when I noticed a cardboard box tucked behind a bush. My heart stopped as I opened it. Inside were my watches, my journals, even a necklace Mark had given me. Nearby, my favorite sweater was draped over a shrub, muddy and ruined. Rage surged through me, hot and fierce. I grabbed the box and stormed inside, finding Daisy sprawled on the couch, scrolling her phone. "What is this, Daisy?" I demanded, holding up the box, my voice shaking. She laughed, cold and cruel. "Oh, relax, Raven. You don't belong here. You're just, what, a charity case? Go back to your little apartment." Her words hit like a slap, but what crushed me was Mrs. Evans, standing in the doorway, saying nothing. "Please, Mrs. Evans," I pleaded, turning to her. "Tell her this isn't right. I've been part of this family." But her eyes were cold, distant. "This is Daisy's home now, Raven," she said, her voice flat. "Maybe it's time you found somewhere else." The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. The woman who'd called me family now looked at me like a stranger. I stood there, clutching my belongings, feeling the life I'd built crumbling. I'd given everything, my time, my money, my heart, and it wasn't enough. That night, I lay awake, Mr. Evans' warning echoing in my mind. I knew I couldn't stay, but leaving meant breaking a promise I'd made to him, to look after his wife. The weight of it all felt like it might crush me. The Evans house, once a place of warmth, had become a prison. Daisy's cruelty and Mrs. Evans' coldness chipped away at me, but I clung to the promise I'd made to Mr. Evans, to care for his wife no matter what. But one evening, everything changed. I came home early from work, my head pounding from a long day at the office. As I slipped through the back door, I heard voices in the living room, Daisy and Mrs. Evans, talking in low, urgent tones. I froze, something in their voices stopping me from announcing myself. "We need to get her to sell that apartment," Daisy said, her voice sharp and greedy. "It's worth a fortune, Mom. We could live better, pay off the debts." My stomach twisted. Mrs. Evans sighed, sounding tired but complicit. "She's not stupid, Daisy. She won't just hand it over." Daisy laughed, a sound that sent chills down my spine. "Leave it to me. I'll play nice, guilt her into it. Once she signs it over, we're set." My heart pounded so loud I thought they'd hear it. They were plotting to take the one thing I had left, the apartment I'd worked so hard for, the last piece of my independence. I backed away, my hands shaking, and slipped into my room, their words burning in my mind. I couldn't stay. Not another minute. With tears blurring my vision, I packed a small bag, clothes, my laptop, the necklace Mark gave me. I didn't say goodbye, they didn't deserve it. I called a cab and headed to the Raleigh train station, my mind a whirlwind of fear and resolve. As the train carried me towards Seattle, doubts gnawed at me. Would Mark understand? Would he think I was running away? The landscape blurred outside the window, matching the chaos in my heart. But staying wasn't an option. Not after what I'd heard. When I arrived at Mark's temporary apartment in Seattle, he opened the door, his face shifting from surprise to worry. "Raven, what's wrong?" he asked, pulling me inside. I collapsed onto his couch, the weight of everything spilling out. I told him about Daisy's hostility, how she'd thrown my things out, how Mrs. Evans had turned on me. And then, the hardest part, the conversation I'd overheard, their plan to trick me into selling my apartment. Mark's face darkened with every word, his jaw tight, his fists clenched. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he asked, his voice thick with frustration and hurt. "I thought I could handle it," I admitted, feeling small. "I didn't want to worry you. Raven, you're my wife. You don't have to face this alone," he said, pacing the small living room. Without another word, he grabbed his phone and dialed his mother. The call was tense, his voice firm. "Mom, this stops now. I know what you and Daisy have been doing to Raven, and I'm done. No more help, no more money, nothing, unless you treat her with respect." I couldn't hear Mrs. Evans' response, but Mark's expression told me enough. "If that's your choice, then we're done," he said, hanging up. He turned to me, his eyes softening. "It's you and me now, Raven. We don't need them." I nodded, tears streaming down my face as he pulled me into his arms. For the first time in months, I felt safe. We spent the next few days rebuilding. I arranged to work remotely, setting up a desk in Mark's cramped apartment. We moved my things out of storage, turning his place into ours. It wasn't much, a small space with mismatched furniture, but it was peaceful. A few weeks later, I got a call from Mrs. Evans. Her voice was sharp, demanding. "Raven, where's the rent money? We need it." I was stunned, her entitlement hitting me like a slap. "After everything, you expect me to keep paying?" I asked, my voice steady despite the anger bubbling inside. I could hear Daisy in the background, yelling, "She's ungrateful, Mom. Make her send it." I took a deep breath. "You called me a beggar, Mrs. Evans. I'm done supporting people who betray me." I hung up, my hands shaking but my heart resolute. Mark squeezed my shoulder, his pride in me clear. "You did good," he said, and I knew he was right. Life in Seattle with Mark felt like a fresh page after a book full of torn chapters. We were building something new, just the two of us, and it was enough. One morning, as we sat sipping coffee in our tiny apartment, I felt a wave of nausea. A quick test confirmed it. I was pregnant. The news hit us like a burst of sunlight. "We're gonna be parents," Mark whispered, his grin wide enough to light up the city. I laughed, tears in my eyes, imagining a little life that was part him, part me. We decided to sell my Raleigh apartment, using the money to buy a small house in a quiet Seattle suburb, near good schools for our future child. It was a modest place with a garden, a place where we could grow roots. But the past wasn't done with us. One evening, my phone rang, Mrs. Evans. Her voice was different, desperate, almost broken. "Raven, I messed up," she said, her words shaky. "Daisy made me sell the house, took the money, and left me with nothing. Can I come stay with you and Mark?" My heart clenched, a mix of pity and pain. I remembered her kindness, the barbecues, the way she'd called me family. But I also remembered her betrayal, her cold words. "You chose Daisy over me," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I forgave you, but I can't let you back into our lives. You have to face the consequences." She pleaded, but I ended the call, blocking her number. It hurt, but it was necessary. Mark nodded, his hand on mine. "You're stronger than you know," he said, and I felt it deep in my bones. Not long after, I was scrolling through a news app over breakfast when a headline stopped me cold. "Local woman arrested in multi-state fraud scheme." The photo showed Daisy, handcuffed, her face a mix of defiance and defeat. I called Mark over, my heart racing. "Look at this," I said, showing him the article. He read it, his expression hardening. Can't say I'm shocked, he said, shaking his head. She made her bed. The article detailed Daisy's scams, fake investment schemes that had swindled thousands. Seeing her face the consequences felt like a weight lifting. It wasn't revenge, but justice, and it gave me closure I didn't know I needed. We heard through a friend that Mrs. Evans was scraping by in a tiny Carey apartment, working 2 jobs to cover debts Daisy left behind. Part of me felt a pang of sadness, but it wasn't my burden anymore. Mark and I had our own future to build. When our daughter, Ember, was born, everything shifted. Holding her tiny hand, watching her sleepy smiles, I felt a love so fierce it drowned out the pain of the past. She's perfect, Mark whispered one night as we stood by her crib, and I nodded, my heart full. Ember was our miracle, a reminder that we'd chosen each other, chosen this life. Our days became a beautiful blur of diaper changes, late-night feedings, and Ember's giggles. The house in Seattle, with its little garden, became our sanctuary. We'd sit outside on warm evenings, planning her future, dreaming of the memories we'd make. The struggles with Daisy and Mrs. Evans faded, not forgotten but no longer heavy. We'd built something stronger, something ours. To everyone who's followed this journey, thank you. You've walked with me through loss, betrayal, and the fight to find my place. If my story hit you in the heart, hit that subscribe button and join us. Every scar tells a story of survival, love, and new beginnings. Keep building your own path, and I'll meet you where the light shines brightest.